Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you today, and I'm itching to tell you my tantalizing animal tales. Each tale is a result of something that happened when my wife Harriet and I were traveling in different parts of the world. And I hope you find the tales as interesting and possibly funny as we did when we experienced the events. They say when you're given a talk, you should tell the audience what you're going to tell them, and finally tell them what you told them. And so that's transparency we want, no secrets. So here is what's coming. There are really essentially 6 tantalizing tales in this talk. And the first one is magical elephants appearing out of nowhere in Kenya, Africa, with the birds getting all the attention. Uninhibited cavorting monkeys in Jaipur, India. Rattlesnakes feasting in Phoenix, Arizona. A yodeling bear at Lake Louise, Banff in Canada. A tip-seeking horse and camel in Cairo, Egypt. And 2 of the world's oddest animals on the Galapagos Islands. So let's start with taking a look at those magical elephants. We took an unusual safari trip to Kenya, Africa in 1995. I say it was unusual because of an interesting couple from California who were also on the trip. To put it very mildly, they were fanatically interested in birds. He was the avowed bird-watching leader of the state of California, the whole state of California, knew the name and disposition of probably every bird in the world. And they had come to Kenya with one purpose in mind, birds. We found ourselves with a sneaky grin, calling them Birdman and Birdie. As we began our safari on the second day in Amboseli, we were bummed out because we had not yet seen the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro, often shrouded in fog, or we hadn't seen a single elephant. Suddenly, at the very start of our day, the fog dissipated, and there was Mount Kilimanjaro in all of its glory. In the presence of all the exclamations and oohs and ahs, Birdman's comment was, "Hey, look everyone, there's a black-bellied bustard on that post over there." Clearly, for Birdman and Birdie, a bird trumped a majestic mountain every time. As the day wore on, we had searched all over and still had not seen a solitary elephant. It was getting late in the afternoon, and we were resigned to having spent 2 days of our precious safari vacation in one of the world's most famous wildlife areas, Amboseli, searching for elephants, but to of no avail. As we headed home in our open-top observation van with Birdman and Birdie and others, someone shouted, "Look up ahead!" Suddenly our van stopped, and out of a nearby clearing came some elephants. More elephants, still more elephants of all sizes and shapes. We were feverishly taking photos and really excited to see so many elephants. The guides estimated there were 400, including babies and elders, all in one place interacting with one another. It was to us an amazing phenomenon. I'd like to show you a video to illustrate this amazing event.
Really nice elephants out here. Whole group. Oh, isn't that neat? See a little baby elephant out there? We're pretty excited about all these elephants. Wow. I mean, you're talking elephants. Look at here. Big bird coming out here. Oh, yeah. There's a buffalo. Look at behind you. Yeah. We are in elephant country this morning. It's the first elephants we've really seen on the trip. It'd be interesting to know how many elephants are out here. There are hundreds of elephants. We have a friendly elephant coming right up toward our van here. I think that elephant really loves have a little drink of water this morning. Exceptionally good water. What a wonderful look at this elephant. I wish I knew the name of this elephant. This elephant always identified elephant by its ears, veins in its ears, and the slits in its ears. So I'm sure that this elephant is a well identified elephant. Oh, look at the little baby elephant. Look at that little baby elephant. Isn't that neat? Oh, look. Yeah. Well, the young ones, they're going to fight each other down there. They're playing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't be too much. That's so true.
Well, there you have it. Evidently, because of the weather patterns of El Nino, the elephants had changed their habits and were migrating en masse to a different area. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for all concerned, all except Birdman and Birdie, that is. Birdman generally ignored the elephants, had his eye on a white-bellied go-away bird, and all the while Birdie was emitting exclamations like, "Oh, what a sweet little bee-eater too," on that elephant's back. So birds, as well as taking precedence over Mount Kilimanjaro, also trumped 400 elephants. The second tale,
really nice.
cavorting monkeys in India. The second tale comes from when we were traveled to India so I could attend and speak at an international conference in mathematics education. After the 9-day conference, Harriet and I traveled on our own, and I must tell you about just one of our travel experiences. Upon arrival at our scheduled hotel in Jaipur, India, the Pink City, we found that our scheduled hotel was full, and no amount of cajoling would get us a room. Feeling a culture shock and somewhat alone in this strange and very busy city, we finally found a room at a third-rate hotel. Now, this wasn't the hotel. This is really just a little step below our hotel, but not too much worse than the hotel we finally found. After a meal in the hotel restaurant, after having 9 days of Indian food, I think I had a large bowl of tomato soup with all the accoutrements, a big mistake. And we retired to our room for a much needed night's sleep. After about 4 hours into this so-called sleep, the action began. To tell the tale adequately, I must, in the format of some TV sitcoms, tell about the event from different perspectives, all going on at the same time. So here we go. My perspective. All at once, I believe I'm as sick as I've ever been. Suffice it to say that my body is divesting itself of everything possible from every possible port of exit. Woe is me. Harriet's perspective. My husband is inconveniently here in the middle of the night as sick as a dog, and as a good wife, I need to be as helpful to him as I can. Oh, brother. The cavorting monkey's perspective. Hey, there's a light in that window. Let's have some fun. Let's cavort outside that window. Let's cavort really loudly. Now the second time period. After what seemed like a couple of hours of total chaos, me erupting, monkeys cavorting, and Harriet putting up with it all and stewing, I found the action continuing unabated, but suddenly realized that there was no toilet paper left in the room. Panic ensues. Harriet's perspective. I need to help this ill husband. I'll call the main desk to have some tissue brought up. Oh no, at this third-rate hotel, there is no one at the desk in the middle of the night. Emergency plan B, I'll rummage through my purse to find an unused or even a used Kleenex. Don't panic, but last of many compartments, sweet success. Monkey's perspective. Let's keep cavorting and having a great, loud, hilarious time just outside this window. Hi there, sexy. The third time period, my perspective. Emergency over. Kleenex held out just long enough. Now I can get some sleep. Totally worn out days, almost asleep. But gosh, those monkeys are noisy. Harriet's perspective. Wow, what a mess. How are we going to get enough rest to drive all the way back to New Delhi tomorrow? Can't sleep. What in the heck are those monkeys doing? Monkey's perspective. Wow, enough cavorting. Let's start making whoopee. If we bump into their window so vigorously that they will think it's about to break, that's even more sexy. Oh boy, what fun. Well, morning came way too soon. And with very bleary eyes, I looked out of the window and saw this very relaxed monkey sitting on the edge of a building. And I may have imagined this. I think he was smoking a cigarette. Well, tale 3 is a short tale, primarily carried by the video, but from Phoenix, Arizona. Harriet and I returned from Brown's Ranch trailhead from a great 3-mile hike. The Scottsdale, Arizona silence was abruptly interrupted by the loudest screams I have ever heard. As we got closer to the little area at the trailhead where guides stand to talk to their group, the screams turned into sobbing and bawling by 2 little girls, probably 6 and 8 years old. The girls were immediately whisked off to their parents to their car, and we came upon a sight shown in this video that I took of a rattlesnake eating a baby bunny rabbit.
Yeah, we just had a little coach whip right up here by the office. Yeah, there. See, look at him open his mouth.
Is he going to eat that? Can you see it, Harriet? Come down.
Yeah, he's coming now. He may take it from the back.
Harriet,
now.
come down here.
It's just a regular, the old run-of-the-mill Diamondback. It's not a Mojave or anything like that. Yeah,
So I thought this would be quick.
no, it takes them a while because they put them in their mouth and they kind of have to open and kind of just pull. Their muscles kind of start to pull them down and in. And it takes a while. See, now he's going to turn his body around here. So he's going to turn his body around so he can get more of a straight-on shot. And then there's the Park Ranger type, kind of like the jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. So we know just enough about a bunch of little stuff to make us semi-dangerous. Well, what is amazing is that, I don't get to see it in action all that often. No, it's usually on National Geographic, I mean, these guys usually eat like once a month or something, don't they? If they get satiated, they'll just hang out. Weeks. But I don't know. I mean, obviously, it must have bit all 4 of them. Yeah, and probably didn't know.
I guess the question of the day is, what would you tell your kids if they had experienced an event like this? Pretty gruesome. I'd be interested in hearing your comments. And tale number 4, a bear experience at Lake Louise, Canada. This bear experience occurred when we took a trip to the beautiful Canadian national parks in 2003. And we found ourselves one fine morning at Lake Louise near Banff. Now, Harriet is a hiker. If there's a destination high in the mountains up a safe but steep trail, Harriet must reach it. Such was the case at the Lake Agnes Trail up to the famous Lake Agnes Tea House. It was a 2-hour walk up a pretty steep path with a lot of switchbacks. And to add to the intrigue of that morning, there was a sign at the entrance that asserted, "Bears have been sighted on this trail." Now, Harriet also does not like the thought of a bear. It is almost as repugnant to her as the thought of a mouse. I think I tried to distract her by pointing to the birds, a skill we learned on an African safari, so that she wouldn't notice the sign. However, after the dust settled, we found ourselves walking up the trail, and Harriet was thinking about bears. Harriet had been assured many times earlier that if you make noise, say ring a bell, it is known to scare bears away, except for black bears. She had also heard the joke all too often that the way to tell a black bear from a brown bear is to open the stomachs of the two bears. The one whose stomach has bells in it is the black bear. On this particular day, we started up the trail at 7:30 a.m. Noticed a sign like this, and also noticed there were no other human beings in sight. About halfway up, I detected that Harriet was getting more and more concerned about bears. So, being the dutiful, protective, macho husband, I asked her if it would help for me to yodel, so we would not surprise the bear. I don't know what went through her mind, but she must have weighed the negatives and decided that hearing me yodel was maybe a smidgen less threatening than being killed by a bear. So she agreed that yodeling would be okay. A little known fact, however, is that I have a talent for yodeling that it originally grew out of my extensive early experience on the farm, where I grew up calling hogs and cows. At any rate, I let forth a yodel that would have utterly charmed a Swiss lass or totally destroyed her hearing. A yodel for sure that would have put the fear of the Lord into even the bravest bear. Shy as I am, I will now use the magic of technology to demonstrate this yodel. Hold on to your hats. This, my friends, is a yodeling pickle. I brought it with me today so that it'll serve as a surrogate yodeler for me. You'll get you'll understand what I mean. Thank you. And immediately, about 2 levels up on that switchback trail, came a much higher quality yodel in return. We never saw, quote, the bear, unquote, and had a wonderful time at the tea house. I guess bears like to play around a little too. All right, tale 5. And then there was a trip to Egypt and Israel we took on with our friends Herman, Evelyn, and Harding in 1989. On a boat trip down the Nile, we all agreed that Herm, Evelyn, Harriet, and I would try to look like sly Egyptians and have someone take a photo. And here it is, one of my favorite photos of all time. Some of us succeeded in looking like sly Egyptians, at least, and I think after they developed and looked at this photo, security seemed to be watching us just a little more closely on that boat trip. But these are not the animals that are the main subject of this tale. You'll get acquainted with them very soon. So tale 5. On the Nile River trip, we decided to get off the boat at Aswan and take a horse and carriage to the downtown area. An Egyptian carriage driver who had a PhD in dickering about price finally agreed that he would take us there and back for the equivalent of $10 US, and that would include the bakshish, that is the tip. So off we went, confident and secure that we had a foolproof agreement with the driver, and all the time gawking at the sights of Egypt. After more shopping than I anticipated, isn't this always the case? We carriaged back to the boat dock. As we hopped out of the carriage and headed for the boat, the grinning driver was well positioned, held out his hand and questioned in an innocent but mildly demanding voice, "Bakshish?" Ever diligent in sticking with the idea that a deal is a deal, I patiently and sternly explained that we had agreed that the bakshish would be included in the original negotiated price. Oh, he explained benevolently, but in a powerful voice that everyone could hear, "No bakshish for me, bakshish for the horse." Needless to say, the humor of it all melded me immediately, and I succumbed to tipping the horse no less. More about him later. And as you can see, a good time was had by all. Well, part B of this tip-seeking camel is about this tale is about a tip-seeking camel in Cairo, Egypt. It happened at the site of the Great Pyramid. As we were planning our day, Evelyn, who was sometimes quiet, boldly asserted that she was not going to come to Egypt without riding a camel. Harriet, equally authoritative, gave the idea it's needed a momentum, and off we went to find some good camels. I was watching Herm dicker with their potential camel driver, and by the look on his face, it appeared that he thought he had gotten a sly Egyptian good deal. And as you can see by these photos, a good camel ride time was then had by all. The rub came in, however, after the ride was over. When it came time for Evelyn to disembark from the camel, encouraged by the driver, would not bend down so Evelyn could get off. When Herm came to the rescue, the driver asserted that you couldn't get off the camel without giving extra bakshish. I don't think he said the bakshish was for the camel, but the camel seemed to think that it was. I think in this, little head here. I think in this photo, Herm is dickering again, so Evelyn wouldn't have to spend the rest of her time in Egypt on that camel. As I thought back on the two parts of this tale, I couldn't help but think that the drivers were complicit for sure, but that it was the laughing horse and the smug camel, if I can find them, it was the laughing horse and the smug camel who were the real culprits. I envisioned them looking like this as we forked over the extra bakshish. And finally, let's take a look at two of the world's oldest animals found on the Galapagos Islands. The weirdest bird in the world and one of the rarest tortoises in the world. I hope you'll find them amazing. It was in 2008, and we were having a great time exploring the Galapagos Islands. In the words of my grandmother, more interesting animals and birds here than you could shake a stick at. As we entered the Darwin Research Station on Santa Cruz Island, we could tell something very important and exciting was going on. The words Lonesome George were on the lips of everyone. but you could tell something important was in their hearts as well. Who is Lonesome George? We interrupted and asked an excited group of young people who appeared to be interns at the center. Finally, everyone trying to answer at the same time subsided, and they told us that Lonesome George was a Pinta Island tortoise, and for the last 40 years had been the last living tortoise of his species, the rarest creature on Earth. And then they let us take a peek at this amazing creature. Why is he called Lonesome George? Harriet asked one of the girls. Well, if people have been trying unsuccessfully for 40 years to fix you up with a mate so you could have a family and extend your species, you'd be called lonesome too. And he sort of looks like comedian George Gobel, who was also called Lonesome George. Then we found out why everyone was at the center of the buzzing and whispering and seeming to be expecting a miracle. Lonesome George had again mated with a female in a species closest to his, and 13 resulting eggs had just then arrived and were being placed in incubators. What's not to be excited about? And we were excited too, a small part of this big event, feeling that we were just a tiny part of one of George's serious attempts to raise a family. However, as soon as we left the Galapagos, the Charles Darwin Foundation reported that the 13 eggs had failed to hatch, and X-rays showed that they were not capable of developing life. Lonesome George died June the 24th, 2012, well over 100 years old, and until death, still lonesome in every respect, the last of his species. We understand that the taxidermied body of Lonesome George now resides on Santa Cruz Island at the Charles Darwin Research Station. Sure glad we went there to meet him. And finally, part B of Tale 6, the last tale, our encounter with the weirdest bird from the Galapagos Islands. Not long after we arrived, we were hiking along North Seymour Island in the Galapagos chain near the water, and Harriet suddenly said, "Look at those diving birds out there. They look like torpedoes." And indeed they did.
Split. All at once.
We found out that they were blue-footed boobies and they were diving for fish. Later, I read that their dive can begin as high as the length of a football field. They fold their wings into their body, transform themselves into arrows, and hit the water at 60 miles an hour or more, going as far as 82 feet below the surface. And boy, can they swim. Only a few minutes later, as if coming to greet us after its fill of fish, we met this blue-footed booby coming ashore, and I took the following photos. Before we left Galapagos, we were surprised to come upon another group of several blue-footed boobies and fascinated by two of them in particular. They were stepping around in a weird way as if trying to keep their feet out of the mud, and they were giving each other a lot of attention. We found out that this dancing around was a courting ritual. particularly the male trying to impress the female with his feet. This video, not taken by me, explains it all. This next video demonstrates some of my personal activity after witnessing the courting blue-footed boobies. My view was, if it works for the boobies, why can't it work for me? You can ask Harriet, but at that time, it seemed like my valiant attempts produced little results. I hope you've enjoyed these tales, and I end with a quote that is inspiring to me about animals. Thank you.